A tale of second chances in the Montana Territory. 1875, the trading post at Iron Range sat like a weathered sentinel against the endless Montana sky. Winter winds carved through gaps in the timber walls, carrying the sharp bite of snow and the promise of harder days ahead. Inside, the air hung thick with tobacco smoke and the acrid smell of cheap liquor. Men huddled around scarred tables, their voices rising and falling with the rhythm of cards and coin. At a corner table, Marcus Flynn's bloodshot eyes stared at his empty hands. The pile of silver dollars that had sat before him at sunset was long gone, along with his rifle and the good boots his father had given him. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold seeping through the walls. The other players watched him with the patient hunger of wolves. "Well, Flynn," drawled the dealer, "a thin man with gold teeth? Got anything else worth wagering?" Marcus's gaze drifted across the room to where Alina stood by the stone hearth, her shoulders rigid with quiet dignity. Her auburn hair was pulled back beneath a worn woolen shawl, and her green eyes stayed fixed on the flames. She had been his wife for 3 years, 3 years without the child he'd promised his family, 3 years of silence and disappointment. 5 years married, Marcus announced, his words carrying over the noise of the room. 5 years and not a blessed thing to show for it, barren as the Badlands in August. Cruel laughter rippled through the smoky air. Lena's hands clenched at her sides, but she kept her eyes on the fire, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her pain. "Tell you what," Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength from the whiskey and the attention. "I'll stake her against a good horse and provisions for the trail." The laughter turned sharper, more vicious. One man raised his glass in mock celebration, while another slapped the table. Lena's chest tightened, shame burning in her throat. But she held herself still as stone. From the shadows near the back wall, a quiet voice cut through the noise. "I'll take that wager." The room fell silent. Heads turned to see Jacob Stone rise slowly from his chair. He was tall and lean, with calloused hands that spoke of honest work and gray eyes that missed nothing. Without ceremony, he walked outside into the bitter night and returned moments later, leading a strong sorrel mare, her coat gleaming even in the lamplight. Behind the horse, he carried saddlebags bulging with supplies. "That mare's worth more than most men see in a year," he said, simply tying her to the hitching post inside, along with enough provisions to see a man through to spring. Marcus studied the offering, greed flickering in his eyes. "Done," he said quickly, as if afraid the stranger might change his mind. Jacob didn't look at Marcus. Instead, his gaze found Alina across the room. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes was steady and sure. He walked toward her, each step deliberate, then stopped just within arm's reach. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "if you're willing, I'd be honored to see you safely away from here." Alina looked up at him, really looked for the first time that night. No demand in his voice, no assumption of ownership. It's just an offer, freely given. She took a shaking breath and placed her hand in his outstretched palm. The cold outside hit like a physical blow, but the air was clean and sharp after the stifling atmosphere of the trading post. Jacob helped her onto his black gelding with gentle efficiency, then swung up behind her. As they rode away from Iron Range, Alina didn't look back at the warm lights or listen to the fading sounds of laughter. She fixed her eyes on the star-scattered horizon ahead. They rode in comfortable silence through snow-covered valleys and past stands of pine that stood like dark guardians against the white landscape. The only sounds were the steady rhythm of hooves and the soft creak of leather. Lena found herself relaxing against the broad back of this quiet stranger who had bought her freedom with a mare and supplies, asking for nothing in return. When they crested a low ridge, she saw it a ranch house nestled in a protective valley. Lamplight glowing warm and golden in every window. Smoke rose straight up from the chimney in the still air, and she could see the dark shapes of cattle moving slowly in the near pasture. It looked like something from a dream, solid and welcoming after so many years of uncertainty. Jacob helped her down in the yard, his touch careful and respectful. The front door opened, spilling more light across the snow. And 3 children appeared, 2 boys and a girl, ranging from perhaps 8 to 14 years old. "Evening," Jakob said to them. "This is Alina. She'll be staying with us." The oldest boy nodded solemnly, while the girl stepped forward with a shy smile. The youngest boy just stared with open curiosity, but there was no fear in any of their faces. Only the natural interest of children meeting someone new. Jakob led the horse toward the barn while Alina stood uncertainly in the yard. The little girl reached out and took her hand, tugging gently toward the warmth of the house. Alina followed, her heart hammering as she crossed the threshold into whatever this new life might bring. The interior of the ranch house wrapped around her like an embrace. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on walls. Lined with books and family photographs, the smell of cornbread and bacon filled the air, rich and homey. The children settled at a long wooden table while Jakob ladled stew from a pot that had been simmering on the stove. He set a bowl before her without fanfare, the simple gesture somehow profound. Lena couldn't remember the last time someone had served her a meal. The stew was thick with vegetables and tender meat, seasoned with herbs she couldn't identify but that tasted like comfort itself. The children chattered easily as they ate, telling Jakob about their day's adventures and asking Alina gentle questions about where she'd come from. She answered carefully, unused to being included in conversation. Okay. But their warmth was infectious. When the meal was finished, Jakob showed her to a small room at the back of the house. It was simply furnished but spotlessly clean, with a narrow bed covered by a patchwork quilt and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "There's a lock on the inside of the door," he said quietly, indicating the brass key on the nightstand. "Use it if it makes you feel safer." Lena stared at him, searching for hidden meaning or expectation. There was none, just a man offering shelter and security to someone who needed both. "Thank you," she whispered. Jakob nodded once and withdrew, closing the door gently behind him. Alina sat on the edge of the bed, holding the key in her palm. It was such a small thing, but it represented something she'd never had before: choice. The power to decide who could enter her space and when. She placed the key back on the nightstand and lay down fully clothed, pulling the quilt up to her chin. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, but inside, it was warm and quiet and, for the first time in years, completely safe. Alina woke to sunlight streaming through frost-covered windows, the sound of children's voices in the distance. She dressed quickly and ventured into the kitchen, where Jakob was already preparing breakfast. He looked up as she entered, his gray eyes crinkling slightly at the corners. "Morning," he said simply. "Coffee's ready if you want some." The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Alina helped with cooking and mending, tended the kitchen garden, and gradually learned the names and personalities of the three children: Samuel, the serious oldest boy; Mary, the bright-eyed girl; and little Thomas, who followed everyone around. With endless questions, Jakob worked the ranch with quiet efficiency, rising before dawn to tend the cattle and horses, coming in dusty and tired but never short-tempered. He spoke to Alina with the same careful respect he showed everyone, never presuming, never demanding, always asking before moving into her space or touching her hand. One morning, while gathering eggs in the chicken coop, Alina noticed a new sign. Hanging from the gatepost, wood was fresh-cut pine, the letters carved deep and clean: Stone Ranch, Jakob and Alina Stone. She stood frozen, reading her name over and over. Not Alina Flynn, the barren wife who'd been traded away like livestock. Alina Stone, as if she'd always belonged here, as if the ranch was as much hers as his. Footsteps crunched in the snow behind her. Jakob appeared at her shoulder, his hat pulled low against the morning sun. "I hope you don't mind," he said, following her gaze to the sign. "Figured it was time to make things official." "Why?" The word came out barely above a whisper. "Because this is your home," he replied without hesitation. "It's been since the day you arrived." Alina felt tears prick her eyes. She'd been a daughter who was never quite good enough, a wife whose worth was measured in children she couldn't provide, and now this quiet man had carved her name beside his, as if she'd always been part of his world. "It's beautiful," she managed. Jakob nodded toward the house, where smoke was rising from the chimney, and the children could be seen moving around in the kitchen. "Come on, breakfast won't make itself." As they walked back together, Alina felt something shift inside her chest. The constant tension she'd carried for years was beginning to loosen, replaced by something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope spring came early that year, melting the snow into rushing streams and turning the valley green. Alina found herself laughing more, joining in the children's games, contributing ideas for improving the ranch. Jacob watched her transformation with quiet satisfaction, never commenting on it directly but making sure she knew her opinions were valued. One evening, as they stood together watching the horses graze in the pasture, Jacob turned to her with that careful expression she'd come to recognize. "Alina," he said quietly, "may I court you properly?" The question caught her off guard. After months of living as his wife in name, he was asking permission to truly be her husband. She looked up into his gray eyes, seeing patience and hope and something deeper that made her heart race. "Yes," she whispered. He smiled then, the first truly unguarded expression she'd seen from him. And Alina knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. In the vast wilderness of the Montana Territory, she'd found not just shelter, but home. Not just safety, but love. And in the growing twilight, with the sound of children's laughter drifting from the house and the scent of wildflowers on the evening breeze, Alina Stonefor, that's who she truly was now, knew. That some stories have endings worth waiting for, in the untamed heart of the American frontier, where survival demanded everything, and trust was earned through deeds rather than words, too. Souls found each other not by chance but by choice. Their love was built on respect, strengthened by patience, and sealed with the quiet promise that some things in this harsh world are worth protecting above all else.